All right, everybody, good morning. Welcome to Roger That 2026. We are going to start the talks with Kevin Berth. Kevin Berth is a professor teaching at Queens College in the anthropology doctoral program of the City University of New York. He attended UC San Diego and got a degree there in anthropology, which is something that I highly value because I also did that. Kevin is a fascinating focus, has a fascinating focus in anthropology. He studies time and how humans use devices such as clocks and watches to represent time. And his research goes over a lot of time to keep with the theme of this particular conference, spanning the archaeological record and current debates about time standards. He's also the author of 4 books, a whole bunch of articles, and he's got another book that is forthcoming this year, The Unsettled Clock, The Persistence of Time Pluralism. And so I will turn it over to Professor Kevin Berth.
Okay, first of all, I want to explain. On February 12th, a family friend who was a priest in our local church passed away. Unfortunately, his funeral mass conflicts with my presentation, so I apologize for not being with you live. I thank Dr. Weibel and the organizers of Roger That for accommodating me so that I could pre-record my presentation. I'm going to take a bit of a different approach to this than a typical academic presentation. From the ancient Greeks through Renaissance Europe, it was common for questions to be discussed in the form of a dialogue. That is the approach I'm taking to a debate that first emerged between the philosopher Henri Bergson and the physicist Albert Einstein. This debate is relevant to timekeeping in space travel. I'm going to approach it through the character of a wealthy space tourist who will take $1 million wristwatch to space. I apologize ahead of time for the atrocious accents I give to some of the characters. This is my problem. I've watched a lot of sci-fi movies, and I'm worried not just about relativity and time dilation, but also how my expensive watch will perform in space. As you point out, if we consider relativity, then relative velocity and gravitational potential affect the relationship of the time on your watch to time on Earth. Yes, geographer, I just said that. But there is also the synchronization problem. To maintain a 1-second accuracy at a level of 1-second precision due to the speed of light, you need to be within 150,000 kilometers of the time source to synchronize your watch. The moon is about 384,400 kilometers away. Oh, great. So you are saying that not only is there the problem of relativity, but also the problem of how to set my watch. I didn't need more anxiety. Hold on. Let's think this through. Let's ask Henri Bergson. He's a smart philosopher. A baboon? Like I want to listen to a baboon? Okay, let's give Bergson a shot. There is an absolute time and an absolute clock time. The time and clock time of the observer located in the privileged system S. Okay. Let me see if I can figure out what you're saying, Bergson. I think you mean that wherever I am, it is the time on my watch that really matters to me. Ha! Bergson! What does he know? Here's Albert Einstein. Every reference body, coordinate system, has its own particular time, unless we are told the reference body to which the statement of time refers There is no meaning in a statement of the time of an event. Okay, Albert. So you are saying that the idea of simultaneity, which I guess is related to synchronization and setting my watch, is a matter of a reference frame, but that unless the reference frame is specified, the time on my watch is meaningless? To find out what time it is to note the simultaneity of an event, of a moment of our life in the outside world. With a clock reading, it is not, in general, to record a simultaneity between clock readings. Henri, it sounds like you don't agree with Albert. You're saying that the time on my watch is still meaningful to me because it is simultaneous with me. Whatever the meaning we assign to the slowings or accelerations of time is therefore to the multiple times that are in question in the theory of relativity. One thing is certain: these slowings and accelerations are due only to the motions of the systems we are considering, and are subject only to the speed with which we imagine each system propelled. And you mean this relativity stuff is just a product of our imagination? That's a relief. There is nothing in our consciousness that allows us to make conclusions about the simultaneity of events. For events are not mental constructions. They are not logical beings. There is therefore no philosopher's time. There is only a psychological time that differs from the time of the physicist. What? What I think has no physical reality? That an event is in the world and not in my head? What's that you are thinking, Henri? If we can create a coordinate frame of reference and stay within it, everything will be fine as long as it's in France. Maybe hearing from Bergson and Einstein was a mistake. It was one of the great debates of the first half of the 20th century, but we need to be practical. Let's ask another physicist. How about Percy Bridgman? He won a Nobel Prize and was known for explaining things clearly. Oh, the baboon again. I guess referring me to Bergson did help calm me a bit, except for that pesky geographer referring me to Einstein. But if you want me to consult another physicist, I'm dubious. I think Albert is overdoing it and overlooking a problem. We have to distinguish two sorts of time: the time of events taking place near each other in space or local time, and the time of events taking place at considerably separated points in space, or extended time. So what you are saying is that Bergson is referring to local time and Einstein to the problems of relating local time to extended time. Interesting ideas, but nobody uses those terms anymore. Let's call local time proper time. And for the sake of understanding our clocks, let's call extended time coordinate time. Okay, monkey. We'll use your terms if they are the most common terms now. So instead of local time, we'll call it proper time. And instead of extended time, we'll call it coordinate time. I actually sort of like the idea that the time kept by my $1 million watch keeps a proper time. To me, the only true time is proper time, the time of the unfolding of experience. And I like you, Bergson, for telling me my proper time is the only true time. Bergson, that's too simple. What if you are relating your time to somebody else's time in a different location? If you call across time zones, you recognize a difference. If you are calling across the universe, you should recognize a difference too. I really don't like you, geographer. You have a point, and I really don't like you dragging in these physicists to make me doubt the time on my expensive watch. C'est un peu anachronique, but let me quote some specialists in time synchronization in outer space. In relativity, there is no a priori definition of simultaneity of two distant events. Therefore, the synchronization of distant clocks is arbitrary. As with all signifiers, time is arbitrary. You mean that the scientists suggest turning to semiotics and that synchronization of two watches is made up? I'm confused. But Robert Nelson, president of the Satellite Engineering Research Corporation, wrote the relation between coordinate time and proper time depends on the clock's position and the state of motion in its gravitational environment. C'est vrai. But that means coordinate time is arbitrary. 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 Bergson was reassuring. But now both the monkey and the geographer are dragging me into a world of physics and mathematics, all to create something made up, and to start a Swiss linguist screeching arbitrary over and over. I thought this was about science, not some combination of science, technology, philosophy, and linguistics. As a bowl of yogurt, I think you are forgetting culture. Culture is what makes the time on the clock something other than arbitrary. After all, the issue Bridgman posed cannot be solved by physics or technology. It requires making decisions that become conventions, and those decisions will be based on cultural ideas. Oh, great. Now a bowl of yogurt talking about culture. Real funny. Culture and institutions. You are using a coordinate time right now. Your watch is set to coordinate universal time, or UTC for short. It is a time maintained by the time service of the International Bureau of Weights and Measures, outside of Paris, France. It's abbreviated UTC as a compromise between French and English. UTC is based on the French spelling. I feel like we have turned a simple question about my watch into a bigger philosophical question of proper time in relationship to relativity and coordinate time. Oh, and I thought that the time on my watch was just what the smartphone said, not UTC. And the International Bureau of Weights and Measures was created by a treaty. It's about politics and power. Okay, so governments have signed a treaty. I guess that is politics. So to understand what a coordinate time is, let's see how UTC is produced. It involves a calculation based on reports from time laboratories managing atomic clocks all over the globe. It's produced? It's made? You mean it's made, not measured? This communication between time laboratories and the time service of the International Bureau of Weights and Measures involves a time transfer protocol. These days, that involves sending time signals back and forth between the laboratories. The reason is to document the signal delay between the sender and the receiver. Remember, signals cannot travel faster than the speed of light, so there is a slight delay that needs to be measured. So there is science and technology involved in the time transfer after all. But the atomic clocks don't tell the time? No, they tell a local version of UTC. And that local version is reported to the International Bureau of Weights and Measures Time Service through time signals. The time service takes all the time signals and uses them to calculate a weighted average. A weighted average? Why are some signals counted more heavily than others? Good question. The weighting is based mostly on the performance of the clocks producing the signals in the past. That performance is judged by how close the clock's local UTC was to calculated UTC the previous month. So the weighted average produces something called free atomic scale, abbreviated EAL. EAL? That's based on the French. Bergson would like that. But that does not align with our seconds. When it is adjusted to tick with our seconds, it becomes International Atomic Time, abbreviated TAI. But TAI has no leap seconds, so those are added to TAI to produce UTC. I get the need to adjust EAL to coincide with TAI, but what's a leap second? Leap seconds are what have been used since 1972 to keep atomic timescales roughly in sync with Earth's rotation. Earth's rotation actually varies a bit. After adding leap seconds to TAI, the International Bureau of Weights and Measures publishes Circular T, a report on how close all the local versions of UTC were to the calculated version. Okay, I'll take it for granted that UTC is created, not directly measured, and that it is TAI plus leap seconds. But UTC is an earthbound time. It is tied to the prime meridian, which is rotating with the Earth. That's a problem if you want an inertial frame of reference for timekeeping in outer space. What you will be comparing your watch to is a coordinate system that is treated as not moving. That's something we need to create. It is a cultural creation using science and technology. Okay, I understand that UTC is produced by time signals that are transmitted to the International Bureau of Weights and Measures within that coordinate frame of reference. But you're saying we can't use that in outer space. And we can't use it because the prime meridian is moving around the planet that itself is moving. I guess I understand. Once you're looking back at Earth, the prime meridian moves as the Earth rotates. Hold on. We create it? The geographer doesn't seem to like the idea of creating a frame of reference. Let me repeat myself. Every reference body coordinate system has its own particular time. Unless we are told the reference body to which the statement of time refers, there is no meaning in a statement of the time of an event. It's okay to create a coordinate system and tell those in it that it is the reference body. Wow. The first time Einstein said that, I thought there was no hope. But now I see he is saying that a coordinate time system is not a feature of the cosmos, but a system of our making. What? We create it and then tell people? As I said, it's about culture and power. I guess the geographer has a point. Who gets to make the choice and how? Allow me to introduce myself. I'm J.L. Austin. I wrote a little book popular with linguists called How to Do Things with What. From what I'm hearing, you want to create a coordinate space-time system to solve your problems. So just say so. Speaking it and getting people to agree to it creates it. Another philosopher, and this time a philosopher of language. You're saying that all that is required is making the choice, but that doesn't address my question of who gets to make it. The International Astronomical Union, abbreviated IAU, has taken on that task. It's an old and respected organization founded in 1919 and based in Paris. They have determined several inertial frames of reference for timekeeping. Look, Bergson, it might be based in France, but it is an international organization after all. The one that the IAU has defined that we'll use is geocentric coordinate time, abbreviated TCG. It imagines a clock at rest at the center of the Earth. Okay, so the center of the Earth is just moving with Earth, not rotating as it's moving in Earth's orbit around the sun. But it's still moving. There is no clock at the center of the Earth. Once again, as much as I hate to admit it, the geographer does have a point. So, we can calculate what a clock would say if it was located at the center of the Earth. We use something called terrestrial time as our first step. Terrestrial time represents the time on Earth as a rotating object. We convert UTC to TT. You need this formula. TT equals UTC plus the number of leap seconds plus 32.184 seconds. Math. I don't want to do math. Oh, okay. I guess what you're telling me is simple arithmetic. But at least we can make our watchware do some math. According to the International Atomic Union, to convert TT to TCG, you must use the following formula. TCG equals TT plus L subscript G times T minus T subscript 0 times 86,400. L subscript G is a constant that represents the rate difference between TCG and TT, which is 6.969290134 times 10 to the negative 10. T equals the number of seconds since the beginning of the current epoch. T subscript 0 is the Julian date for the beginning of the epoch, which is 2,443,144.5 in days, and 86,400 is the number of seconds in a day. I don't want to do math. So are you telling me that calculating TT is not good enough? I need to convert it to something called geocentric coordinate time? Just stop it. We aren't going to worry about the math. Okay, not so simple. But you don't need to do all the mathematics. Just let the people in charge of synchronizing the spaceship clock do it. Your question is really how your watch will perform in relationship to the spaceship's clock that is synchronized to TCG. That's a relief. Thank you, Baboon. I'll let those who like math do the math. And all I need to do is compare my watch to the clock on the spaceship. Hello? May I say something? Ptolemy? Why are you here? Didn't we ditch your astronomy centuries ago? The current suggestion to use geocentric coordinate time. You know what that means? The center of your inertial reference for purposes of timekeeping will be the Earth. The Earth will once again be the center of the universe. Fine, we are making a cultural choice to place Earth at the center of the cosmos for purposes of timekeeping. But as elegant as Ptolemy's system was for representing the solar system, it was still wrong. And now Isaac Newton? Hasn't relativistic space-time replaced your ideas of absolute time and space? I too wish to say something. Actually, if you're using TCG as a coordinate time system for all space missions, isn't that de facto like my idea of absolute time? Aren't you rejecting relativity? Alas, they are using relativity to create a coordinate time that looks like your absolute time. The irony. Don't be sad, Albert. You are still right. These are all cultural choices, and culture is real. Didn't you hear, Austin? We create with words. First, by placing humanity at the timekeeping center of the cosmos. That's cultural. Second, opting for a coordinate time rather than a relative time creates an illusion of Newton's absolute time. And third, requiring multiple agencies to produce the time is different from measuring time with a single clock. Oh, so the science and technology goes into how to culturally create a coordinate time. But the choice of the center of the coordinate time system is cultural, as is the choice to create a coordinate time system rather than trying to constantly convert between an infinite number of proper times. And you, dear watch owner, have a few personal choices to make based on what you value. You can let your watch just tick on its own without worrying about synchronization. Or you can periodically adjust it to coincide with the spaceship clock, which in turn is frequently synchronized to Earth time through a time transfer system. Or you can get your watch company to adjust the balance wheel to compensate for conditions in space. But I would not recommend thus. More choices? Okay, so I can choose to let my watch keep its own time, or I can periodically reset it, or I can try and get my watch company to compensate for conditions in space. What should I choose? Money is no object. We'll take the third possibility first, since it is relatively, a pun, simple. Adjustment of oscillation. Please don't try to be funny, monkey. GPS satellites are a good example. To compensate for gravitational effects and time dilations from orbiting the Earth, GPS satellites, GPS satellite is given a fractional rate offset prior to launch of negative 4.465 times 10 to the negative 10th from its nominal frequency of 10.23 megahertz, so that when it is in orbit, its average rate is the same as the rate of a clock on the ground. The problem is that as you travel around this solar system, the gravitational effects will vary. So unlike a GPS satellite, you cannot preset the period of your watch's balance wheel. So I suggest you don't choose this option. That is interesting that GPS clocks are adjusted to tick at the same rate as Earth clocks when the GPS clocks are in space. But when they are on the ground, they tick at a different rate. Yeah, I see your point about gravitational fields. Quite honestly, relativity scares me. The second possibility is to frequently adjust one's watch. This is, in fact, what the spaceship clock will do through a synchronization protocol. Whereas you would simply reset the watch, the electronics in the spaceship will work through the mathematics of a time transfer protocol. I could do that. That sounds easy and much like what I do on Earth. As for the third possibility, if you allow your watch to free run, in some ways, I think this might be the most interesting, because it will allow you to compare your watch to the spaceship clock and possibly see the difference between proper time and coordinate time in space travel. Now that you mention it, that does sound sort of cool. But you need to keep in mind 3 reasons for your watch to vary from the coordinate time. I fear you're going to complicate my life once again. Reason 1, the variance of the watch over time, even if it is a chronometer within the COSC standard. The COSC is the Swiss Chronometer Testing Institute. It applies the standards determined by the International Standards Organization. It tests chronometers over 15 days in 5 different positions and 3 different temperatures. During that time, the average daily rate must not exceed -4 or +6 seconds. Yeah, I know about COSC. My watch is well within that standard. Reason 2, the effect of relative velocity on your frame of reference. This is not acting directly on the watch. The watch will tick as normal. But since the spaceship clock is synchronized to Earth through a coordinate time, there is a difference between that coordinate time and the proper time on your watch. Though truthfully, for the spaceship to have a velocity so fast as to be noticeable on your watch, say about 10 seconds a day, you need to be going at about 46 kilometers per second. The expected velocity of a spaceship going to Mars will probably not be more than about 30 kilometers per second. That sounds pretty fast. Look, you idiot! You're traveling at about 30 kilometers per second right now. That's how fast the Earth is moving in its orbit. As long as you are not near the speed of light, it is the acceleration and deceleration that kills you, not the speed. I never thought of how fast I'm moving just being stationary here on Earth. Reason 3, the effect of changes in gravity on your frame of reference and consequently your proper time. This is messier since it will vary based on whether you are in zero gravity deep space or within a gravity field of a planetary body. This might make a difference, but it will be hard to tell if it is gravity or the performance of your watch, since both variances would be on the order of a few seconds. Okay, I understand this one is a bit unpredictable, but that is what might make letting my watch free run be a cool experiment. Basically, your watch will be fine. It's your mental health and judgment I worry about when you buy $1 million watch and then worry about how it will perform in outer space. Who are you trying to impress? Martians, you know, little green folk, not little green baboons. Thank you.
Very nice. Let's maybe move out of screen sharing, and I have some questions. I have to say the voices were definitely not exactly what I was expecting, even though you had warned me. So there you go. And I starting out the day relating to a bowl of yogurt is also not something I was expecting. So
well, I didn't have to worry about the accent of a bowl of yogurt.
That's true. That's good. So let's see. There was a lot of sort of the nitty gritty about how space affects time and how the motions of our planet affect time and things like that. But some of the questions that I've got are connected to things that maybe are the practical applications of this. So I know you've done some writing on time pluralism. And do you think if humans are successfully able to set up outposts in space and settle different areas on different planets, asteroids, the moon, whatever, that time pluralism is going to be inevitable?
Good question. And there's a debate about that. Recently, within the last 2 years, the European Space Agency has suggested that the moon needs its own coordinate time that is different from Earth. And I would imagine Mars, with its different relative velocity from Earth and its different gravitational field, would also need its own coordinate time system if there was settlement on Mars. On the other hand, you do have very powerful forces that really, really, really want a single uniform coordinate time system, because that makes the computers all run better. And the reason it makes the computers all run better is everything you do on a computer is done with a timestamp. And to have timestamps generated by different coordinate frames of reference is going to create all sorts of headaches for computer programmers. So this is going to be an ongoing battle between the astronomers and the space explorers and the computer people, much as the leap second was a battle between the astronomers and the rocket people and the computer people. So this is a new permutation of what's been an ongoing debate between two different ways to view time. As to what I think will happen, I honestly think that time pluralism is inevitable. And the reason I think it's inevitable is because we're living at a moment of aberration. The coordinated time system that we currently use is not very old. And there still are multiple time systems out there. We just don't really recognize them. You know, the people of the Jewish faith keep their Zamanim. You have Chinese timekeeping. You have Hindus with their own time scale. We are constantly coordinating between different calendar systems. So for today, when we're recording this, is the Chinese New Year. Mm-hmm. And we talk about how the Chinese New Year moves in our calendar. But in fact, if you were to flip it around, our Gregorian New Year moves in the Chinese calendar. So, you know, these time systems themselves are relative to each other. And for most of human history, we have existed with multiple ways of reckoning time. So I wouldn't be surprised if we have to go back to that.
You would know better than I do whether I'm correct, but I seem to remember that China operates with a single time zone, even though
Yes.
it's a very large body, which means that the way that we tend to think about time, where noon means the sun is overhead and, other things that are supposed to be tied directly to what's happening in the sky, doesn't function the same way in China. And could you talk a little bit about that? Because if we were talking about a standardized time, which you already said you don't think is going to happen if there's space settlements, but if there were, wouldn't it be like having a strange effect on like circadian rhythms and other things like that?
Well, I mean, China is probably the most extreme example of a large time zone that spans over 4 hours of solar time, although the central time zone of the United States spans almost 2 hours of solar time. So, if you're driving east to west in a single day in the central time zone of the United States, you definitely recognize that fact. So, as it is right now, the time standard for timestamps is UTC. And whatever device you're using, deep within that device, it's using UTC, whatever it may be displaying to you as you travel around the world. Underneath it all is UTC. The question is, if we settle different planetary bodies, will those different planetary bodies need their own equivalent of UTC to function there? And that's where the debate between the computer people and the astronomers will be most acute. Circadian rhythms are something entirely different. We are diurnal mammals that are adapted to the planet on which we live. We have a body in our brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which has two components. One keeps an approximate 24-hour cycle. The other is connected to our retinal nerves. And so that 24-hour cycle is reset every day. It has a tolerance of about plus or minus a half hour or so. So you take our evolutionary path, which has been to have our diurnal cycles coordinated with Earth, and you put us on a different planetary body with different light cycles, we're going to experience what's called internal desynchronization. And how we will adapt to that is an important question. I mean, it's already been a question that's been addressed on the International Space Station because, they aren't going through a normal rotational cycle. So they have their body cycles very much set by the clock. It's also been something that's been dealt with on submarines where, of course, when you're underwater, you aren't getting light cues from the sun. So that problem's been addressed before, but the problem is that when you do force the human body outside of what it is evolutionarily adapted to do, you will start to develop symptoms. Jet lag is basically an example of what happens when you desynchronize our bodies.
Yeah, you've raised some interesting questions there. And every time you say something, I have like a new question that comes through. And then I think, okay, what am I going to ask now?
Well, that's why my course is a whole semester long.
There you go. One thing that I was thinking about as you were talking is this kind of biological force that you're talking about with us being mammals and having evolved under certain circumstances. But the other one is the cultural one. And so if we were to have a settlement on Mars, which very recently there seems to be some backing away from that. Elon Musk in particular has sort of said, well, the moon first and kind of settled that. But let's say that we did. Do you think humans living on Mars are going to be interested in setting up a new Martian time? Or do you think they're going to be invested in maintaining the Earth calendar, their birthdays on, March 4th or whatever it is? And I want to keep that kind of calendar in place. And second question, do you think that would change over time?
Well, it depends on who those people are.
That's true.
You know, um, I can't imagine what would happen with a bunch of Jewish rabbis on Mars. debating when the Sabbath should be or when Passover should be
You've got two
relative to
moons.
Marshall time. There's already all sorts of debates about when you cross the international date line here on Earth, so I can't imagine what it would be like on Mars. And the fact is that a lot of religions are very much tied to Earth cycles, and in many cases to specific locations on the Earth. So if you have people of these different faiths move to a different planetary body, my guess is that they would still keep a calendar tethered to Earth, but also keep a calendar tethered to where they were.
So sort of a religious calendar and like a daily calendar.
And there's a precedent for that. The Ottoman Empire did that. The Ottoman Empire kept the Islamic calendar, but they also kept an administrative calendar. The Islamic calendar is a strictly lunar one of only about 354 days a year. So it migrates relative to the seasons. So to administrate agricultural practice, the Ottomans had an administrative calendar that was a solar calendar. And to be good Muslims, they kept the Islamic calendar to observe Islamic holidays.
You know that culture changes over time, and that religion changes over time. So this is kind of what I was getting at, and this is one of my pet things to think about. If we had a settlement on Mars, and it started out with the strict coordination, the religious calendar would be Earth time. Do you think that would change as generations continued to live in that place, if that were possible? Do you think that, we talked about it being a religious thing, but do you think keeping Earth time on Mars would be a political act?
Well, it would have to be a political act. I mean, that was sort of the yogurt's point.
Yeah.
it's all cultural and political.
Right.
In fact, what we're talking about when we're talking about time in outer space is really science and technology in the service of cultural decisions. So it's, you can't use just straight relativity, because then you're using Lorentz transforms to relate in an infinite number of proper times. So administratively, socially, in terms of coordinating social relationships and social activities, going by strict relativity in space doesn't make any sense. So it is making choices, and then the science and the technology in service of the cultural and political choices that are made. But that does raise the question of who gets to make the choice. Whoever settles on Mars, well, will they make choices based on a Gregorian calendar? Will they make choices based on another calendar? If the Chinese settle on Mars, maybe New Year's on Mars will be the Chinese New Year. Mm-hmm. And it might be a Chinese New Year in coordination with Mars moons. I mean, who knows? But it will probably be some form of multi-calendar system. But that's not unusual. Even on Earth, there are more people who live by multiple calendars than there are people who live by a single calendar. When you total up the total number of Chinese, Hindus, Muslims, and Jews, they far outnumber the people who just use the Gregorian calendar and no other calendar.
In some of your work, you've talked about the idea that clock time has detached workers from seasonal rhythms on Earth. So if that's the case, what happens when you leave Earth entirely?
Clock time detaches workers from seasonal rhythms on other planets. That would be my guess. It's so deeply ingrained in our electronics, so that it's even hard for people to fully recognize seasonal changes in their workplace if they're doing, say, factory work in a factory with no windows.
Right.
What's the point of noticing the seasonal changes? On the moon, I don't expect there to be a lot of seasonal work.
Is there, what does season mean under those?
Yeah, what does season mean on the moon? It's not like rainy season, dry season, winter, summer. I mean, it's pretty much not extremely variable throughout the year. And on Mars, the seasons on Mars are going to be very different from the seasons on Earth. But for that matter, the seasons on Earth are variable wherever you are. Mm-hmm. Where I did my first field research in Trinidad, there's no winter there.
No,
No,
you're in the tropics. Yeah,
it's the tropics. So Factory work becomes uniform and homogenized regardless of what the seasons are all across the earth. So I imagine if there's some form of mass production on another planet or on the moon, it would be a similar sort of thing. And most likely, I imagine the most likely exploitive industry on any planetary body would be mining.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're doing mining, you aren't necessarily caring about daylight anyway.
Right.
In fact, the first documented evidence I have of any clock-based shift work is from the 16th century in English mines.
And you might as well not worry about the sun if you don't get to see it while you're at your workday. It shifts the whole thing. And obviously the temperature is more constant underground. And there's a lot, I mean, we have a lot of analogs on Earth for thinking about, what these things would look like in space. So that turns out to be really useful. Astronomical question. Does the moon have a prime meridian? Does Mars have a prime meridian? And would that be important in these discussions?
Well, it would be important for navigating your way around, for knowing where you are. You need some sort of coordinate system and something to anchor the coordinate system of space to know where you are. And to my knowledge, there's not a prime meridian on the moon right now. And to my knowledge, there's not a prime meridian on Mars right now, but that's not really my area of expertise. And even if there is a prime meridian, it could change. It has changed. I mean, the prime meridian that we currently use only dates back to 1884.
Right. I was just thinking about if somebody were to try to divide the moon into time zones or something similar, would that even make any sense, especially given the strange rotation of the moon in its connection to the Earth?
Well, since the time zones emerged to keep trains from running into each other, unless there are trains on the moon, I doubt there will be a demand for time zones on the moon. In fact,
there could be trains on the moon. We don't know.
Yeah, but
that's something that could happen.
They'll probably coordinate using whatever, either UTC or a lunar time rather than, the idea of railroad time. And what a lot of people don't realize is that time zones were actually adopted before they were legally recognized. Mm-hmm. So, the railroads adopted these things and people followed the railroads about 20 years before they became law. So, a lot of ideas of time zones and timing is actually industry driven rather than politically driven. Law in particular, what legislatures do, what governments do, usually lags decades behind what the science and technology and the industrialists are doing.
All right, last question. If we were to send you on a trip to Mars, you could be there for a while, come back, which watch would you bring?
Which watch would I? Probably one of my cheap pocket watches.
Digital?
No, it's analog.
Okay. Because the idea of what that would work like in microgravity is very interesting to me. I feel like digital technology is set, but trying to get everything else to work with the sort of Swiss precision and the movement that you were talking about.
Well, it's a quartz-driven analog watch, so
okay.
It's not mechanical.
All right.
But the reason why I like the pocket watch, the analog pocket watch, is I can reset the time on it without anybody seeing me do it by simply pulling out the stem and adjusting it.
There you go.
Resetting the time on a digital watch is much more involved.
That is true.
So I can't do that silly trick that I like to do sometimes.
Right. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for this talk. It was really interesting and fun. And I think it's getting our day off to a good start. So I appreciate it. And thank you very, very much.
And thank you for inviting me to speak.